to talk about how to scale your organization with Pete Kazanjy and Max Klang at Atrium. Very excited to start this event. But first, while we give folks some minutes to join, I'm gonna ask my audience to go into the chat and tell us where you're talking from. We love to see people from everywhere here. And I also have a icebreaker for my speakers. So I'm going to ask them, Pete and Max, what's your favorite midnight snack?
After you, Max.
I'm a big Taco Bell guy. I'm frequently ordering that via Uber Eats or DoorDash, very late hours of the evening. So it's delicious.
Midnight?
I think that
Well,
makes sense because, like, I don't know if like where the closest Taco Bell is to like Haight-Ashbury.
Not close.
So, not close. That was like
That's funny.
at the MSP Dreamforce happy hour. That was bananas the other night. We had 1,500 signups, and then like I think there was like 500 attendees throughout the night. But one of Atrium's customers got one of our sales managers, Sean Cardenas, kind of like cornered, right, with like a bottle of Eagle Rare, and Sean was like, "Oh yeah, I definitely like had to make a 11 p.m. Taco Bell run before I got home to Oakland."
Mandatory.
Yeah, hardcore. I think my favorite midnight snack is gonna be, oh man, I don't know. It's like whatever. I think the big thing that I've been doing recently, I can't believe I'm admitting to this, is that like I've been eating my like son's like leftover like lunch, my like 5-year-old. Like like a couple times a week he has they have, we call it like special lunch or whatever. Like a couple times a week he's got like hot lunch at school or whatever. He's 5. When we don't send him in with a with like his lunchbox or whatever, and like invariably there's always like leftovers, and so it's like, oh okay, like what kind of like crazy stuff did like Mikey not eat at school today?
Oh my
Which is good
goodness.
because it's usually like a very small amount of things, because like Lord knows like I don't need to eat more, that's for sure.
Well, that's good. Some leftovers and some Taco Bell. Fun fact, I've never
Uh-huh.
been to a Taco Bell. Never,
Oh my
never
goodness.
ate it.
You're missing
Right?
out.
We'll fix that. We'll fix that when you're not here to San Francisco.
All right, so let's get started today. Let me share my slides right here. We are here today to talk about how to scale your revenue org from your first hire to 20 plus reps, an event brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and to help them see corners that they might not know about. And we do that through great live sessions like this one you're about to experience. We have a robust online forum where the community asks a lot of questions and get a lot of answers. And we also have quarterly summits. And we're starting to get back to in-person events, which is pretty fun. We just had the Dreamforce Happy Hour that Pete mentioned. It was a lot of fun. And
Awesome.
if you're already not a part of the MSP community, you will be invited to join right after this event, so you can join us for in-person events, webinars, and much more. And if you like this content, and I'm sure you're gonna like it, we are organizing our October Summit. It's the RevX Fest, happening October 11th through the 13th. We put together 25 events of amazing content where you can hear from the CEO of HighSpot, Gainsight, Winning by Design, as well as leaders at Lattice, Pendle, Outreach, Atrium, and much, much more. The lineup is bananas. It's completely crazy. I'm going to put a link right here now
It's
in
absolutely
the chat.
fantastic.
Well, yeah, and it's just a click away, so people can just click on this link I just put in the chat, sign up for it, and you can get all the knowledge from the best in class in sales. Um, but that's enough about future events. Let's talk about this event. I have some housekeeping notes for you. This event is being recorded and you will be able to access the recording in the previous events page at the MSP website. And second, if you have any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function and we'll be sure to get to them during the event. They love answering questions, so please do make a lot of questions and ask a lot of questions, and Pete will answer all of them, Max too. Um, And finally, this event is sponsored by Atrium, an amazing company, but I'll let the man himself talk about Atrium. And Pete, I'm going to pass it to you so you can introduce us to Atrium, introduce yourself, and introduce us to Max. And I will see you at the end for my closing notes.
All right, killer. You'll show up and like pull us off stage. Be like, all right, your time is done. Um, Hey everyone, my name is Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. For folks who aren't familiar with Atrium, Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve their performance. One of the things that's super cool about Atrium is extraordinarily easy to set up. You can set up a free account in 5 minutes through a read-only connection to your Salesforce CRM, and instantly it'll show you how your reps are performing across hundreds and hundreds of key metrics there. So let's do a little introductions here. I'll introduce myself, and then I can have Max here introduce himself. Um, my name's Pete. As noted earlier, I'm one of the founders and also the CRO at Atrium here, where I'm responsible for our go-to-market function. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company back in like 2010. It's called TalentBin. It was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And at TalentBin, I was our first, I was a business generalist founder, but then our first rep, our first sales manager, sales leader, and then eventually was and then when we were acquired by Monster Worldwide, I was responsible for new product sales at Monster. It's a 600-person sales organization. So just a little bit of a different little change of pace there. After I left Monster after 2 years, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then also started Modern Sales Pro. So that's a little bit on me. I'm super pumped to have Max here, who's one of our account executives over here at Atrium. Max has a illustrious background as a seller, working in a number of killer sales organizations. Max, you want to share with folks what you spend your time doing here at Atrium, and the couple of gigs before that?
Yeah. As Pete mentioned, I'm Max. I'm an account executive here at Atrium. Before I was here, I was a seller at Bright Edge and a seller at Asana. And most of my days here are spent just working with prospects, helping the team, talking about Atrium, and it's fun actually. The content today is pretty aligned with a lot of the conversations that we're having. So talking about scaling from a small amount of reps up to a large amount of reps. So really excited about kind of the conversation today.
Oh yeah, and one of the things that's kind of fun for our AEs is like they see it all. They see it all, like all the dirty laundry, right? Like lots of fun stuff there. But also like, one of the things that's really fun about Atrium is that we sell on customer data. So essentially like people set up a free account for themselves, and they work with our account executives to go through there and get insights out of it, which ends up being kind of like a fun little choose your own adventure game. Before we kind of get jamming here, folks are interested in getting a copy of my book and also a Coffees for Closers Yeti mug here. We're going to go ahead and drop the hyperlink to sign up for that in the chat here. So if you're interested in getting a free copy of that, go ahead and sign up there. All we ask in exchange is a short disco conversation with one of our account executives. So super fun stuff there. So let's go ahead and get this party started here. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen as opposed to using the slides there, just so I can be a little bit more demonstrative here. Okay, cool. So what we're going to talk about is scaling our revenue organization here. And really what we're going to talk about is, one, we're going to talk about where maybe organization can kind of get like caught up and maybe tripped up a little bit in like the beginnings of scaling their sales organization, and then and through kind of founders having kind of miscomprehensions around the importance of sales, and then we're going to get into actually like what effective scaling looks like, and that should round us out here. So one of the things that we oftentimes, or I oftentimes see in very early stage organizations, is that founders can oftentimes be kind of confused about the importance of sales, and you got to give them a break, because oftentimes the only place where they're familiar, where they've had experience with these sort of things, is kind of like in the movies, if you will. And so like all that being said, obviously it's extremely important. The other challenge that you oftentimes see is that you have organizations, or like the media or what have you, kind of like selling what I like to call these seductive yet crappy anti patterns here, where either A, it's like, hey, we just publish documentation and people just buy, right? Like, developer tools or API companies or what have you, or hey, we don't actually have salespeople here. Whether that's Slack or Dropbox or fill in the blank. And I think an important thing for people to realize there, that ends up actually kind of being bull, because these screenshots are a little old here, but if you went and looked at Twilio or Stripe or Square's uh, sales organizations on LinkedIn, it turns out that they actually have many, 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 many sellers. And then moreover, if you did the same sort of thing on these organizations that say they don't have sales organizations, well, they might call themselves something different, business development, like at Palantir or what have you, or growth or whatever. But it turns out that there ends up being a lot of sellers there. And so it's like really important that folks recognize that this is a really important thing for organizations to be aware of and to invest in as appropriate. And so there's like pretty negative implications of having founders who aren't bought into the importance of go-to-market excellence, whether it's organizations who have an opinion, or like believe that referrals are the only way of scaling their sales organization, and then as opposed to like core outbound sales, or organizations that overscale too quickly without regard to how, like, the appropriate pace of scaling, and kind of the negative implications associated with that. And so what I'm going to kind of present here is what we kind of talk about these important stages, like go-to-market stages, maturity stages, and then we're going to talk through what the actual entry and exit criteria for those different stages would be there. So one of the things that organizations oftentimes, or like folks kind of get confused about, is they think that like enterprise value, right, the value of the organization, can scales linearly with time, right? It's smooth value creation. And you can kind of understand where people maybe kind of like get this idea from it, because you see this in large organizations where, like, over time the stock goes up, and because the revenue goes up, and the market cap goes up accordingly. But the thing is that in startups, and this isn't just like seed stage or what have you, seeds A, B, C, you're really down here, right? You're all the way down here at the very, very beginning of time. And down here, it looks more like these step functions here, where what ends up happening is like you hit an unlock, where you're able to turn customer value. You're able to de-risk your the business by creating more value for customers by unlocking different stages here. And so the way that I like to refer to these kind of stages are business motion inflection points there. And there's kind of a series of them that we'll talk through here. So the first step is, hey, do we know what problem that it is what we're solving? Right? Usually when you first start out, like, you don't necessarily, like, you're grinding on that. Oh, cool. We do know what problem we're solving, right? We're not just like making something up. Lots of people have it. Yes, we know what we're doing. All right, boom. Right. And then value has gone up here, right? Enterprise value has gone up. So then we start building things in order to solve that problem. And does it actually work? Well, no, it doesn't. It's terrible. The software is broken, or the hardware is broken, and it's not actually creating value. Grind. Yes, it actually does deliver the utility that it's that it's been promised. Wonderful. Boom. You've unlocked more value there. And then so on and so forth. Will someone pay? Will many people pay? Et cetera, et cetera. And so what those stages kind of look like in practice here is, do we know what problem we're solving? Does it actually work? Will someone pay? Will many people pay? Can non-founders sell this? Can we build a mini sales team? Can we max out a small sales organization? And these are kind of like, this right here is kind of this right here is like how you unlock this up here. And then these steps up here are the ones that really are associated with scaling up, if you will. And so related to that is not all of these stages are created equal. Different ones kind of unlock more scale. So for instance, can a non-founder, someone who's not the founder of the organization, sell this? Well, when you do that and you are able to document your sales motion and then make it such that other people can sell the solution in question, all of a sudden now you're not gated on one person selling it, like the founder, maybe two people selling it, two founders or what have you. And instead you can hire multiple salespeople. And then moreover, if you can prove that you can build a mini sales team, that then you can clone out over time various pods of sales folks, well then now you have an opportunity to scale up even more substantially. And so these are kind of the stages that we like to refer to here, like customer development, which is what is the problem we're solving, how are we going to go about it, existence proof of value creation, so like does the software actually work, does it deliver utility to people, existence proof of value exchange, so will someone actually pay for this, the repeated value exchange, like will many people pay for this, right? We're documenting a sales motion here. And then we start getting into kind of like key parts of scale. Can non-founders sell this, right? We're able to abstract out and specialize. Can we make a mini sales team, etc. And so these are the ones that we're going to kind of like focus on more substantially here in this presentation. These earlier ones, like we'll just kind of jump through them kind of more quickly because it's probably less applicable to the folks that are here today. But if you want to come back and check this out, like we'll share the presentation after the fact, you can check that out. Wonderful. So the first step is what problem is that we're solving. The important thing here is to not skip past this. You want to make sure that you're doing customer development, that you're discovering and validating pain points in the market. The interesting thing about this is like these should all be customer interviews where you're asking people how they go about, do they have a problem that you as a entrepreneur think that they might have? How do they go about solving it? Why is it unsatisfactory? They kind of sound like discovery questions because they are. And that ends up being important like later on. Usually the person who's doing most of this behavior is the business founder. Does it work? So after we validated that there's a problem that is worth solving, we're going to be putting together our solution. And then importantly, what we're doing here is we need to prove before we scale up at all that our solution actually improves the KPIs that we set out to improve. So whatever it is that you're seeking to, like the problem is that you are seeking to solve, like, say you're a sales loft and you're selling sales engagement software and you want to prove that by using sales engagement software, your SDRs can be more efficient and they can generate more meetings than they would have otherwise. Well, the KPI that we're probably looking for there is opportunity creation or meeting creation in a given time period. Does that actually work? Right? Was that actually done? So this is usually done by the individual founder again. Will someone pay? The thing that's being done here is proof of value exchange. So once we know that we are improving these KPIs, these business measures that we know are important, well, we should be able to exchange money for that, right? So via a pricing model. So to use our sales loft example again, as earlier, we know that an organization, like more opportunities are more valuable because, like, say your average selling price is $20,000 and your win rate is like 20% or what have you. We know that any given opportunity is probably worth $4,000 there, right? Because divide 20K by 0.2. We know that that's like at least a $4,000 value right there. And so if we are able to accelerate opportunity production like that, we know that we're generating more opportunities through our the application of this clever software, and so we should be able to exchange money for that. Right. So that's so that's all kind of like the early founder-led stuff. Then the next step that we get to is, will many people pay for this? And this is the beginnings. The reason I'm going to slow down here, and we're going to kind of start talking about, how this applies to kind of scaling, is this is the beginnings of where you're going to set up your sales team for success later on. And so the steps here, like, whereas the idea here was, can we sell something, anything? Will someone buy? The purpose of this is to then repeat that, not just to add more revenue or ARR or what have you, but importantly, what we're doing here is we're forming the sales motion, right? We're documenting that sales motion. And the reason why it's super, super, super important to then to draw, or like write down that treasure map and document that sales motion, is because that's the first step to having other people be able to pick that up and use it on their own. And so the steps that are kind of required here would be engaging a larger number of non-friendly prospects and running them through the sales motion in order to turn them into customers. But importantly, while you're doing that, what you should be doing is honing your ideal customer profile, which should be like, a description, like a Google Doc or a Notion page or what have you, a Word doc. An ideal customer profile. You should be figuring out how to identify these folks at scale. What are the qualification criteria associated with that? Email outreach materials, sales presentations, demo and scripts, discovery questions. So creating these assets while you're doing this recurrent opportunity engagement, then is not just setting yourself up for success, but it's setting up the folks who kind of are coming down the line for more success there. The next step is, can non-founders sell this? So once you've gotten to a point where you have 1 or 2 dozen customers where you have a clear and repeatable sales motion that is well documented, now is the opportunity, or now is the time to then add in other folks. All right, this is a big area of potential leverage here, because if you can prove that someone other than the founder can sell this, well, if we can get 2 other people to sell this, we probably can get 10 other people to sell this. We probably can get 20 other people to sell this. And that's really kind of the secret to scale there. So in this stage right here, what you're doing is you're adding a couple of AEs to the mix. And so the important thing here is, the important thing here is that your role as the founder or the early sales leader in this situation is actually changing substantially from doing the selling to enabling other people to do the selling. And so the emphasis should be on, and then also your behaviors should be aligned to things, and your calendar space should be aligned to things like hiring, training, management. Yes, you may still be selling yourself, but that's kind of ancillary, because if we can't get these 2 people to success right here, there's no way that we're going to get to 4, 6, 8, etc. There. So Max, I know that usually the sort of organizations that Atrium works with is there's, I think our rule of thumb is SDR plus AE has to be equal to 5 or greater.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that you probably interact with some organizations, maybe have 2 or 3 or 4 account executives and are kind of in this stage right here. What are some of the things that kind of trip organizations up right here that people should be aware of?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that often gets like not talked about enough is that like when you're switching from being like a founder seller to now managing like a small pod of reps, you're
Mhm.
basically like full time on documentation of the sales motion, all of the assets
Mm.
that we use in the sales process, and then you're basically trying to create like different little like feedback loops so that like when one rep learns something, the other reps now get to benefit from that question or that thing that happens. And so like one of the ways that we do this is like we have like reply all like email chains for specific
Mm.
sales motion questions or product questions or issues and stuff like that, so everyone gets to learn from how one rep is doing something, or any type of like adjustments that were made. It's like all public to the AE team or whatever.
Yep, makes sense. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and not only um, making a point of like catching something like, oh, hey, Max did something clever, or Peter did something clever, or Scotty did something clever. It's not just like immediately like sharing it to folks and saying, hey, here you go, guys, like remember to do this, but then
Hmm.
also folding it into the sales motion materials, like, oh, so
Yep.
and so had a great point about XYZ. We should create a slide for that, and we should put it into the sales deck at slide 17, so
Yeah,
everybody like can't miss it and just like runs into it, right?
and
So the
then now added into
systematization.
the ramping curriculum and so on. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, so this is where you need to start getting it. It's not dissimilar, I guess. It's not dissimilar. One of the things that we talk about with our customers all the time is like how being a manager is very different than being a rep. And not only do you have to be a data driven sales manager, but you have to engage in behaviors that are like pretty different than what you did as a seller. This is kind of a similar situation here, where like you're going from being a seller to being somebody who enables other folks. So one thing I want to kind of touch on really quickly before Max and I continue to get into kind of like the next stages of scaling is kind of like define for people what what scaling is, and like how it actually happens. And so the way that this works is, let's like use a prototypical sales rep here. So the way that like sales reps turn leads into money is by having customer facing meetings and selling folks, right? Having discovery conversations, demos, proposals, etc. And so the way that this works is, take a prototypical example of a an AE where you're targeting, maybe booking $60,000 of bookings a month, the 45-day sales cycle. And when a rep is like starting out, right, they're upside down in terms um, of of like um, contribution to the organization, right? So say, they cost the organization $15,000 a month or what have you. But what ends up happening is, over time, as they're engaging more opportunities, some of those start to close, right? And so the good news is those turn into money. And so then what ends up happening is, at a certain point, the AE starts covering their own nut at some point in time. But then what ends up happening is they eventually get to full productivity, right? And so at the point of full productivity, um, they kind of cap out at that point in time. Like, you can't have more than 15 or 20 customer facing meetings in a week. It's like kind of bananas. And so at this point, like, let's assume that this rep gets the full productivity. They're now throwing money off into the business, but it doesn't grow, right? Like, they hit a steady state, and they're on their merry way. So the way that like scaling works there is, you actually do that with multiple reps concurrently. So imagine you have the same sort of like unit of performance there of an account executive, and then you did 4 of them. Well, that you hired 4. Well, to start out, they would cost you, like, same sort of situation as up here, but they would cost you a bunch of, cost you money up front. But as they were handling opportunities, they would grow. They would eventually pass that covering their own nut period there, and eventually get to full productivity there. And so, but instead of throwing off whatever it was, 45K per month, they'd be throwing off 180K per month, and that'd be pretty sweet, right? This is the ideal situation. And then once you've like effectively onboarded those folks, you would do the next thing. You would do the same thing sorry, you would do the same thing, but again, so you would get to the top of these folks getting to full productivity, you would add another 4, you would then jump down, because like those folks would be ramping again, and then they would get to the point where they were at full productivity, and you're on your merry way. And so then by just kind of like chaining this together, like hiring class after hiring class, this is ultimately what this looks like, right? So you're just adding more folks, right? And then you would get to a much higher throughput of revenue here. And so the funny thing is that like if you zoom out, this is kind of like our zoom out situation. This is kind of what this looks like. This is how sales organizations, right? So like, you know, large sales organizations, whether you're talking about like Figma or Datadog or, you know, fill in the blank, this is how they scale up here. And so what I want to kind of comment on is there's negative implications associated with like doing a bad job at this. So let's use a situation where instead of these folks getting like starting to cover themselves at month 3, and then moreover getting to full productivity at, what is it, 4, 5, 6, 7, getting to full productivity at month 7. Well, let's say instead they only start covering themselves at month 5, and they only get to full productivity at like month 8 or month 9, right? So there's like their ramp is elongated there. Well, so same kind of situation. If you have 4 reps, same sort of like, it's like you're burning more cash during this period right here. And then, you know, you don't get to the point where they're throwing cash off into the business until much later. And so what ends up happening here is like if you are ramping teams like this right here, right? That's that is a lower growth rate than this right here. And what I can and imagine that you only add an incremental cohort to your team after the prior team or after the prior cohort has effectively ramped. Well, in this sort of situation, you're only able to add, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the time that this company was able to add far more. You know, whatever it was, like 8 ramping cohorts there. So this is kind of like the difference between, you know, poorly ramping your reps versus effectively ramping your reps here. This is a key use case for us here at Atrium, is instrumenting, you know, instrumenting the performance or the effective ramp of teams. Max, what are some of the biggest like hiccups that you see when it comes to organizations onboarding and ramping or not ramping their reps?
Yeah, I mean, after you have like, I don't know, 5 to 10 reps in seat that have been ramped, like you have enough data to like really understand what the like leading indicators are to like a failure to launch with a rep or like a really healthy, successful rep. And so like I think one of the things I always notice is that like when I ask like a prospect, like, hey, what are the leading indicators that kind of dictate a healthy ramp versus a not healthy ramp? They usually don't have a really good understanding of what they should be looking for. And usually they're focused only on like outputs, like how much booked revenue did they have by day 90, or how many ops did they create by day 90. And so kind of taking a step back and focusing on like, what are the indicators to success? We should be tracking those. And that's usually the first problem.
Yeah, for sure. And this is actually, we do a master class on data-driven ramping, right? Ramp instrumentation and ramp success there. But some of those like leading indicators would be things like in AE land, it would be how many new opportunities are coming into people's pipe, how much their pipe is building, how many customer facing meetings folks are having, how many like, and then if you want to get even cooler, like how many stages are being advanced. If you have key stages in the sales process, like as an example, Atrium obviously has a you know, an account setup stage in our sales process. That's something that's like really, really, really important to see. Our account executives, like when they have a discovery conversation with their with prospects, are they turning on accounts with those folks? Are they revealing pain to them in order to get folks to turn on an account? And then, you know, and then that's not sufficient. Obviously, then you want to drive that down funnel. Are they getting to you know, are they getting to proposals, et cetera? And so if you just count all those leading indicators, like Max was saying, you'll understand like, hey, do we have a ramp that looks more like this, or do we have a ramping situation that looks more like this? And then moreover, you might actually have some reps, like you might have a subset of your reps where the ramp looks like this, and then maybe one of your reps is ramping more slowly. Paying attention to those leading indicators allows you to intervene there and get ahead of that, and either fix that person or offboard them before they consume too many resources that could be going to other folks. Cool. So now that we all kind of know what ramping is all about, now we're going to talk about how you do that in practice. So the next step here is what I call, can we make a mini sales team here? And so what's happening here is the business founder or like that early sales leader is really fully getting out of the business of being a seller. Right, like they might be brought onto calls to be a sales engineer, or to kind of like like audit the effectiveness of sales conversations that are being had, et cetera, but like they're not selling. And the reason why this is an important stage right here is because what you want to be able to do is to kind of validate that, what I call a unit of revenue production here, where because this is like where hiccups start to happen, right? Like, oh, there's a handoff issue between the SDR team and the AE team, or there's a handoff issue between the AEs and customer success, or, oh, you know what, actually the AE should handle the expansion ops, the customer success folks shouldn't handle the expansion ops. Like, this is the stage at which you're figuring those various things out. And that's why I like to call this a orchestration, refinement, and management, right? Because like what's happening here is like we're looking at these, like we're looking at this like unit of revenue production here and trying to like take off the sharp edges, because versus if we, because then we're going to like triple this or quadruple this or what have you. And so if you haven't like shaved off those sharp edges with like a small set of people, and instead you have like a large set of people, it's going to be like really really problematic there. Max, when you think about some of these like sharp edges that organizations need to trim off here, what are the sort of the things that you have kind of seen come to mind? I mean, obviously you joined Atrium when we were a little bit bigger than this, but I'm sure you see this in your customers all the time, kind of like probably oftentimes identified by some of the data that's in their Atrium accounts.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's always kind of challenging is like the Salesforce documentation of the different stages of the sales motion, and then like the exit criteria like identified with each. I feel like a lot of times like early stage sellers like are kind of like, I don't know, you find yourself just like kind of winging it to like get the deals done. And like as you scale, you need like really rigorous like documentation of like how to enter and exit each stage, and like making sure that it's almost like a recipe for future kind of reps that we add on, so they know exactly what they should be doing at each part of the motion.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, and I don't think that ever ends, because literally, like, it's so funny. We have a SDR promo who's in ramp right now, and I caught an opportunity that was in the wrong stage, and I was just like, okay, cool, like go ahead. But the important thing was, like, hey, just go ahead and like, here's the hyperlink to all the definitions of our of our stages and our entry and exit criteria. So at least the documentation is there, but that's never going to stop being a problem. And so if you don't have documentation on that, and it's not like easily accessible for folks, it's always going to be a problem there. Yeah, so the kind of exit criteria for this stage of kind of organization is that like this unit is producing revenue at a at a predictable rate, where all the folks who are in this unit are reliably hitting their goals, right? So they're, with the AEs, they're hitting their bookings targets, they're hitting their, they're at the win rates that you would expect them to be at. The SDR is producing the amount of opportunities that you would expect, et cetera. Like essentially like the little machine is humming. And so the reason why is because then what we're going to do is we're going to jump to this next stage where we're adding a bunch more of these units here, right? So like this right here is just this unit right here, but we're just adding a couple more here. Because as noted earlier, like this is how scale up happens, because Now what we're focused on is getting these folks to success. Once they are at success, they will, like, now we have 3 assembly lines who are pumping out revenue, right? The way that that one assembly line was pumping out revenue before. And so the really kind of key thing that you want to be focused on here is every time you scale up, what's going to happen is, like, there's always going to be like brokenness that shows up. There's always going to be like new issues. You're going to realize that a source of like a marketing channel that previously felt like it was like infinitely scalable, all of a sudden is starting to cap out, and the AEs aren't being fed enough. You're going to find that, you know, the SDR programs that previously worked stopped working. You're going to find that there's like more coordination issues between AEs and CSMs. Point is that like you're literally just doing the same sort of stuff here around like orchestration and refinement, and then like finding bugs that are now popping up because of this new scale, and then like hammering them down, like killing those bugs, creating new tooling, new documentation, et cetera, because there's always going to be more and more of these issues that pop up. Um, and so when you're now, and so the anti pattern here would be something like, if you went from this and added like, all right, cool, we're ready to go, we should add like 10 account executives. Well, like, gee whiz, that's going to be, you know, pretty tough to get that amount of people up and running with, like, you know, one business founder or one early kind of VP of sales. That is a kind of a key differentiator between this stage right here and this stage right here, is this is the point at which you might be professionalizing that that management layer there. And then moreover, it might be a point at which you start seeing someone who's dedicated to bringing, like, to making things more orderly and like actually kind of tending the machine in the form of a sales operations person here. I think the other thing too is that this is kind of the stage at which you have too many people to kind of like just keep it in your brain. In this case right here, as a, whether you're a business founder or like an early sales leader, you're probably on everybody's calls, right? Or like you're sitting next to them. At this point right here, you're not able to be on everybody's calls, and so this is where you can't really keep everybody's performance and how they're doing in your head. And so this is where data-driven sales management starts really becoming important here, because like you can't manage by gut, or as one of our AEs likes to say, you can't manage by horoscope here. You have to manage by you have to start managing by metric. Max, what are some of the biggest hiccups that you see in organizations that are at this stage?
I think it's just that, like, they are still trying to kind of like, manage, I guess, how you put it, right, via horoscope, and kind of keeping all of this in their brain. And like that is just like not possible once you have a handful of AEs, a handful of SDRs. Like, you really do need to be leaning into like the metrics, the KPIs that you want to care about, and really starting to like systematize like what success looks like for each role, and then just working backwards on kind of like how we review that stuff and assess it.
Yeah, for sure. And that can be a little bit, it's funny, like there's kind of like growing pains in each step here, right? Like the thing to be careful about here is, like, as a business founder, and I think the lessons here apply from sellers going to management. When you go from this to like this, the big potential shortfall is like, hey, like, look, you're not in the business of selling anymore. You need to be enabling these people. And then moreover, when you go from this, right, where you can like be riding along with everybody, to this, you like, you can't rely on instrumentation via osmosis. You can't rely on being on every call. There's just like no way to do it. You have to start managing by metric, right? And in order to make, like, in order to ensure that the organization is having success, and like jump on places where it's not, because there's always going to be people who are not having success, or each individual will have their own little area where they're not having success. Cool. So then the next stage here, and this is like a really kind of like fancy this is like the fanciest problem right here is when you go from something like this to actually having a team of teams. And again, like, and so what this means is, rather than all of these folks, maybe going into a single manager, instead what we have is all the SDRs under one team, like under one person. We've got all the account executives under probably two, in this case, probably two AE managers. And then now the VP of sales and success is out of the day-to-day management, and instead in the business of like just jumping up another layer of abstraction. So now this person right here is not in the management business, they're in the managing of managers business. And so that all the more means a focus on systems, operating rhythms, making sure that the AEs, like that there's consistency, like the AE managers are having they are having one-on-ones, they are on the calendar, this is the agenda in those one-on-ones that is being focused on, the and then authenticating that is the case. And those one-on-ones are different than pipeline reviews. That's okay. Pipeline reviews or deal strategy sessions are important. Those are also on the calendar at some cadence with a different agenda, with different assets, and essentially just like architecting the operating rhythm of the organization, and then driving compliance, not of the individual AEs or SDRs, but then driving compliance and accountability of those managers to those systems. And this is actually where we see a lot of organizations also struggle, where the VP of sales thinks that they're still kind of like in the management business, as opposed to like they either think they're in the management business, or they think about themselves oftentimes as like being enabled by the organization. Like, I'm here to hit my number as the VP of sales, versus saying, hey, I'm actually here as a servant and enabler of the SDR manager, of the AE managers, of the manager of the CS team. And how do I make it such that they are successful? Well, by giving them systems and tools and like reporting assets and what have you. Max, what are the stuff, like, this is obviously, like, this right here is kind of like a sweet spot for Atrium, or like where we start out, and then this of course is like where Atrium really starts to sing for people, because obviously, like, the VP of sales can't keep all this in the head, and then moreover they're focused on making sure that their managers, who oftentimes are like newly promoted and maybe fairly junior managers, have the relevant assets to manage by metric. Where do you see kind of like hiccups here in organizations that you work with?
Yeah, I think on like the reporting side, like where it's relevant to Atrium is like usually at this point, like you'll notice like in your slide here, there's one person in sales ops, and then there's like, 4 different managers here, and then a sales leader, right? And so all of those people need like different sets of instrumentation from a reporting
Sure.
standpoint. And it becomes quite difficult for like your, solo RevOps practitioner to be able to support all of the like ad hoc reporting requests
Yep.
on top of their other more strategic, like tactical things that they're focused on. And so it becomes kind of like this like delicate balance where they're balancing all of these like Slack inbound requests from their managers and then all of the other things that they ought to be doing. And so that's where I think we see a lot of like growing pains initially, at least in the conversations that I'm typically having with folks.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. I think we see that a lot in stage, in like organizations of this size, where you have like, a single sales operations person kind of like losing their mind, because it's like, hey, hey Bob, I need you to implement a CPQ system, right? Oh, by the way, you're getting all these ad hoc requests from your managers, from from what have you. Also, I need you to do commissions, also XYZ, also XYZ, also XYZ. That's a really good point. What are some of the things that you've seen organizations do that makes them more successful, where introducing leverage into the organizations, helping these managers be more effective? Where like how do organizations solve that problem?
I mean, in general, I think just like making sure that managers have like the proper instrumentation from the get-go is like the biggest thing that needs to get solved. Because like if your managers are just like solely reliant on, an internal vendor for all of their reporting and insights about their reps, like that's going to be a problem eventually if it's not already being felt. And so the big thing is just making sure that like frontline managers have like a ton of like agency around like the access that they have regarding, again, rep performance insights and stuff of that nature. Obviously you can do that by having, Atrium does that really well, but there's also other solutions before you get there as well. So I mean, the big thing is just making sure they have good access to stuff like that and they know how to use it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. Like just being intentional, and we do a number of classes on this, but like being intentional around, okay, cool. Like, what's the most important thing to give these managers leverage? Effective one-on-ones. Great. Okay, cool. What are the assets that are required in those effective one-on-ones? Well, let's put together like, a couple of reports, a couple dashboards on that, and then let's clone it out to make sure that everybody has that. And so like now we've enabled those managers. So rather than the managers coming to us and being like, hey, I have a question. Can you help me like look at, win rates for all my AEs in the trailing 90 days, instead of that being like an ad hoc request, it's instead like, oh yeah, that's on your, that's on your one-on-one dashboard, right? Like down here at the bottom where we have like trailing 90-day win rate, trailing 90-day ASP, trailing 90-day deal cycle, or what have you. So kind of like front running, if you will, those needs to make sure that folks like, and then you're kind of like servicing them proactively.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that organizations oftentimes struggle with, though, is that then even if you provide those assets to managers, like helping them with the interpretation of that ends up being pretty challenging, largely because, again, oftentimes these managers are going to be fairly recently promoted, whether it's like, in this organization or the prior organization. And of course, like learning to interpret and manage by metric ends up being a non-trivial kind of muscle to build over time. And so if as a sales operations person you're trying, or as a sales leader, you're trying to like read the tea leaves for these folks, that obviously is not a fairly scalable proposition there. One thing that we've seen that like if you can invest in like enabling your managers to be better at that. This is actually one of the reasons why we work with Richard Harris, who's a sales trainer, a sales enablement leader, who we run two boot camps, two virtual boot camps with him monthly. They're just like half a day. One is for sales managers and one is for sales leaders, but just to help those managers better understand how to have effective one-on-ones, have kind of candid, crucial performance conversations, all those sort of things. If you can invest in your managers and give them leverage, I guess that's what we're talking about. It's like if you can give them leverage through tooling, that's fantastic. If you can give them leverage through upskilling them, that's also super fantastic, because then if those managers can interpret metrics on their own, they're not coming to sales operations like asking them to help interpret things. Or moreover, I mean, that would be a good thing, like coming to sales operations to ask for interpretation help. The worst thing, of course, would just be like managing by gut and all the sort of like negative implications associated with that. Awesome. So yes, so the thing that if you're interested in kind of like the next stage and how to like make this more effective here, um, a great class to check out there, or great master class to check out here, would be mastering second level sales leadership. I think we are actually up on the content here. So if folks are we can kind of get into some questions here. And then moreover, if folks are interested in getting a copy of Founding Sales here, or and a Coffees for Closers Yeti mug, we're going to go ahead and drop the link here in the chat, and folks can just go ahead and sign up for that. Again, all we ask is for a quick discovery conversation with one of our account executives. So A couple of questions here. So Juan had a question. What role is the most critical for ramp? Is it mainly documentation, a manager, sales enablement? I mean, I think it kind of depends on the stage of organization. But I mean, the thing that I would say is the most important role, like regardless of the stage, is going to be the person who's in the role of the sales manager. And right, so if, like earlier on, what that's going to be is the person who's responsible for, this right here, like helping these, like this person right here is going to be the one who, if they're doing a good job, is enabling these folks. And then moreover, these folks right here, they're really the people who are going to be helping make or break the success of these folks right here. So really helping them, investing in them as much as possible to make sure that they're successful. Max, what would your reaction to that be? What's the most kind of like critical role at these various stages of ramp?
It's hard to say. I feel like at each stage, it seems like the founder, like leader, is like playing each of those roles and then replacing
Sure.
themselves with a net new human to then take over that role. And so I think like just understanding like the type of person you're going to hire to replace yourself at each stage
Sure.
is like the most important part. And then making sure again the documentation piece is like really, really airtight so that it's a smooth transition. So I don't know if there's any one role that's more important than the rest. It's really just like, hey, how are we going to make the founder not be the kind of like person that's doing this and make that transition at each stage, really easy.
Yeah, I think that's an important, a great insight there, because um, like getting that, the other way that you scale effectively is by giving away jobs, so that other people can, like, so that you can other people can do them for you. And so if that's the founder getting out of the business of, that individual sales management by hiring an effective sales manager, or the founder getting out of the business of selling by getting, more account executives into the organization. But then also, like, as a sale, like same sort of thing with the sales leader, right? Um like the sales leader getting out of the business of individual kind of line management, not because it's not a worthy thing, it's obviously extremely important, but because then that's the mechanism by which you're going to scale, is by having 5 sales managers, 6 or like 10 sales managers, and the associated reps there. um Wonderful. So I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap up here. Oh, hi Eduardo, look at that.
Hi, I'm back.
Hello.
Well, thank you very much for this amazing content. The masterclass was fantastic. Thank you, Max, for all the comments that you gave here. We are going to wrap things up, but first, I want to thank the audience for attending and for staying with us to the end. I hope you enjoyed the links in the chat right there. There's a lot of resources for you to use and to take advantage of. Pete has a masterclass coming up on Thursday. I put a link in the chat too, so go ahead and sign up for it too. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Max. I hope to see you pretty soon in the next masterclass. And audience, don't forget the recording will be available on the MMSPA website, and you will receive a follow-up email with the link for you to watch everything over and over again. Thank you so much. I'll see you
Okay.
in the next event.
See